What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Creators Well podcast. I'm your host, Justin Reeves. And for those who may not know, the Creators Well is a platform for Christian creatives, entrepreneurs, visionaries, and purpose seekers to be refreshed, renewed, and revitalized for their God given purposes and callings. Because as we know, life is rough, the road is tough, and people are ghetto. So we need all the help that we can get out here. And this month, I've been so excited to celebrate Women's History and Empowerment Month. We've had some amazing panelists, guests, whatever you want to call them, really stars on the podcast. And today we are wrapping up the month with none other than Dr. Serelda. And I am super excited to have her here. She is somebody that has pushed me into my purpose in the past and continues to support me. So I think I wanted to get her on here anyway. I think it's the perfect time to do it. And there may be other conversations too, because she's a multi hyphenate. I'll let her tell more about herself. I don't think we'll be able to get through everything because we're not going to be on here for forever.
Right.
But yeah, so welcome, Dr. Serelda. And yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. So thank you, Justin, for the opportunity to be on the creative as well. I've been to some of your events as well, where there was actually a stage, a physical stage. So yes, thank you for the opportunity. I am Dr. Serelda Herbin. I don't know where I should start. I don't know. Yeah, I'm from Louisiana, born and raised, graduated from Grambling State University with the computer information systems degree, believe it or not, which I don't really use a lot of, but in other ways I do actually use it. Master's in business administration, and then a doctorate in strategic leadership and leadership coaching. So, love school, love learning. I'm a word nerd. That drives a lot of what I do. I've created several master classes on use your words, word it right, the right words to say. So they have helped so many people. I was surprised because I thought I was writing these master classes and creating them for people to learn how to write books. And the people that were coming to the class were folks that were trying to get through their PhDs. I'm like, wait, that's not what I created it for. And of course, God said, well, you never know who's going to come and who's going to need it. So I just try and build it and do what God says do, and then everything else happens. What else? I've been a part of 11 book projects. Nine of those were books that actually, eight of those were books that I wrote. And then I was a co-writer for some of the others. So I do enjoy writing. I wrote a book back in 2000, I think 18. And this was my freshman book, my first one. And I was terrified. I was like, how in the world am I going to write a book? And all of the um the sabotage energies and voices started to come in. Well, you're from Louisiana, you can't write, you're Black, you're a woman, what do you have to say? People already know everything about you. Like everything that you could think of to cause me not to write, that popped up in my head. And so of course I ignored it, and it was a bestseller in 24 hours. And then the rest is history. I'm like, oh, I can do this, and I can
Yeah.
write, and somebody is reading it. So
Yeah.
um, there's that. And of course, from recent changes in my life, I was married 23 years, recently divorced a year now, this year, and just pivoting, just learning me again, learning my identity, learning how to operate in life in an ecosystem that I've really not operated it in as an adult. Now, of course, I wasn't married underage, but
Right.
once I became of age, a job in the military, my whole career was married. So now I'm on the other side of that, and I'm relearning how to live. And I mean, the only thing that was constant, and that is constant, is God. So I'm not afraid. It's
And we thank
definitely
God
an
for his
adjustment though.
consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to pause there and see how many questions you have for me.
I got a whole lot. I think one of the questions I've been asking, I believe I think I asked everybody this, but it's something that I have been interested in for all creatives. When
Mhm.
did you realize that you were you? I think like TD Jakes asked that question in a sermon one time, and I started to think about it when he was like, "I didn't realize I was me," and I was like, "Huh." So I always ask people now, like, when did you realize you were you?
When you asked the question, I saw a visual of two highways. I saw a highway that showed me that I was different. and this was middle school, high school. It showed me
Okay.
that my brain was thinking differently than the people that I was in circles with. And
Okay.
in that time frame growing up, it felt uncomfortable. So I stopped doing it. I stopped talking. I stopped
Mm,
speaking. I just didn't want to do it. And the second piece for that same highway is because my mom was a drug addict. My grandmother raised me, and there
mhm,
are things that happened to me over time through grade school that was quite embarrassing. It's in my first book, but from that piece of it, I learned that I could sing. And that I only started singing eighth grade. I wasn't really singing until eighth grade, and I was in a stage band with the marching band and all that. And when I was singing, people would be like, "Oh my God, like what in the world? Are you going to be a superstar?" And I'm like,
mhm,
"Me? Like, what are you talking about? I'm just singing." And
mhm,
what I realized was, wait, I can't sing. I can't do this. Like my background, if I sing, people are going to want to know more
mm,
about me. And I don't want to talk about that. So I won't sing. So I was creating these barriers. They weren't barriers coming at me. I created them myself. And I realized you're not God, and God didn't, you didn't give yourself these gifts. God is going to
right,
continue to pull them out. And clearly he keeps doing it. Um, that's the first part. The second part is the second highway when I realized that was me is my career in the federal government, post military, being a civilian and being in civic organizations, not just my job, but in places where I'm connected, circles that I'm in, it's the same consistent trend. Like, wow, how did you do that? Oh my God, can you teach us this? Like, why aren't you should be out there on a stage doing a talk show. Like, how you are so good at this, or how did you get people to say that or resolve this or do that? And I'm like, I didn't
mhm,
do it. I just created the space. And
right,
so it's scary to wrap up your question. It is scary because it is touching people. And I don't want to be the culprit of touching somebody and it does not bring peace or it does not bring
mhm,
hope. So my mechanism is not to touch at all, which I have to work on because it's not a good healthy mechanism, because that means nobody gets access, and
right.
that's not the intent. So yeah, I'm gonna pause because I can go on and on for that.
No, I mean that's why we have you interviewed. That's why you're here. I think even like going when you're saying that in my mind, I'm thinking, of course. So for those who don't know, we go to church together, and she's one of the elders at our church. One of the young adults' favorite elders. I'm just gonna say that. I don't care who says whatever. But even with that, when you were saying like you create spaces for safety, I think a lot of like I just started thinking about like the young adults at our church are a trip. We really are. But we always say like, oh, if Miss Serelda starts pacing, like go the other direction. She gonna have a word for you. She gonna come have but I think like just going off what you said, like you do curate comfortability, and I think that's a superpower of yours.
Oh,
So even when listening to that, I was like, oh, like because of course I don't work with you, I don't work in the federal government, but to know that you're the same in both and like have some of the same transferable like skill that is it's amazing. I think it's really great when you see that somebody is consistent. Of course, there are changes depending on like you show up a little bit differently at work, you show up a little bit differently at church just because of how the environment dictates, but overall the core of you is the same. So that's amazing. So I another thing, a little pivot to the books, but
mhm,
specifically with the books, like I'm an event guy. I love event production and all of that. And I think what is amazing to me is like you have writers and then you have speakers. Not every speaker is a writer and not every writer is a speaker, but you happen to do both, which is amazing. So I've seen you. I was had the flu, so I wasn't able to come to the book launch. But just knowing that you've had several, like you have your own podcast, you have your own, you've done the summit last August, correct?
mhm.
And then you had the book launch. So, like, what inspired you to bring the books in real life? Because there are a lot of authors who may be watching this one day or may come across you. And a lot of times, authors may stop at the publication. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I think people are craving community, people are creating spaces based upon your work. So what encouraged you to bring it in real life? What hurdles that you face? Like let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So when you initially asked the question, the first thing I thought about is this 57-year-old woman who came up to me at church and
Okay.
she said, "Your book is amazing. Congratulations, but I'm sorry, I can't get past the introduction." And of course, I'm smiling, but in my head, I'm like, oh gosh, like what happened? And there were tears in her eyes. And she said, "Our backgrounds mirror, like all of the stuff that happened to you.
Mm,
I am almost 60 and I didn't realize that I did not deal with it until I started reading your book." She
wow.
said, "Please don't stop writing." She said, "I'm not ready, but I do want to apologize because I cannot pick it up again right now. I've got to deal
Mhm.
with my own internal work." And
Yeah.
that was very powerful to me because in my mind I'm saying, well, I want to get all the words eloquently on the page, and I want to, and I'm a decent organizer when I'm thinking about my thoughts. But God said, whatever you wrote, it touched somebody and they identified with it, so just write. Right.
Yeah.
um my first book was a birthday gift as a result of me going to a class that was how to write your book in 30 days. One of my
Mhm.
pastor friends from Germany, when I was stationed there, he's now a an international speaker, and he hosted this class. It was like $120. I'm like, okay, I can afford that. If it doesn't work out, nah, I'll probably get
Right.
through the introduction. I wrote the book in 24 days. I'm like, did I just literally write a book in 24 days? Like, I didn't just write it and have a manuscript. I wrote it and published it, and it was a bestseller the next day.
And that's what I always remember. Like literally, like I just remember you, I think you posted about doing this class, and then it was like literally a month later, you're like, I have a book. And I was like, this has to be a lie. Like, because people be spending years and years. I'm like, what does she mean? Okay, all right, I'll buy it, I'll see.
Yes,
I'll
I was.
listen.
It was an accomplishment for me, but the book was also therapy. And
Mm,
so what I realized is talking about the pieces of the book, and I even started to intertwine some of my topics and concepts into the workplace because I realized they help other people. And it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to give you this book. Obviously, I don't want to, break any rules by saying, hey, I got a
yeah,
book, everybody, co-workers, you got to buy it.
yeah.
Um, but I did talk about from at risk to high performing organizations. And in my head, I'm like, when I got my job in 2021 as a director of diversity, I think I may have facilitated 200 facilitations that year,
Hmm.
whether it was virtual or I was traveling to do it. And I'm like, what am I supposed to talk about? They didn't give me any boundaries. And then I said, wait, I'm a GS 15. They're not going to give me boundaries. They hired me. I'm a director. I'm supposed to know what to do.
Right.
And God just started giving me, use what you got. Just
Hmm.
use what you got. And you know how to transform this stuff. And people were like, oh my God, now even today, Justin, I facilitated with a Booz Allen team, which was also humbling to me. I was the only one in the
That's
organization. It was like,
amazing.
we want you to pair with them. And they were asking me more questions than I was asking them. So anyway, I need to readjust my whole life and thought process of where I'm
That's
employed. But
amazing.
yes. And so somebody in the class, it was virtual because the continuing resolution had not happened at the time we were planning
Mm.
it. And we didn't know if we had to go virtual. This person said, I really admire you. And every time you speak, I always try to get in the room. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He was
Mhm.
like, I don't think you met me, but I was on a virtual call, and the way that you take a virtual facilitation and you're able to pull from the comments, he said, I've seen, and this was a male, and he didn't look like us. He said, I've seen people trying to facilitate virtual spaces and in person. He said, I've seen you in person as well. And the way that you manage the room, whether it's virtual or in person, I think is a gift. And you are a disarmer. That and I've taken
Mm.
that word because I've heard it a couple of times. You disarm the space somehow and end up making people share everything they know about their lives. I'm like, I didn't
Yeah,
do it. He's like,
I
but
agree. I agree.
so it's just been amazing, this book thing, book to speaking. You just gave me an idea. I may have to do something with that anyway. Um,
Do it.
yeah, from books to speaking. That's pretty good. I'm gonna.
Because I think like so there's somebody I know I work with, and she says like her entire like her ministry, her work is all about words, and it just
Mhm.
shows up in multiple ways. So like she's written books, she's written music, she's speaking now, she teaches, she's done poetry, she's done something else I can't remember, but like all around words. And she was like, if you're a communicator, like you communicate, like that's what you do. And I was like, wow, you're right. Like you you are multi-talented, but your gift is words. Like, and it just shows up in a variety of ways. So that's just amazing. In a world where books are now being discouraged. um and but even before all of January's antics,
Mhm.
um I
Yes.
feel like books are not losing popularity, but there's a smaller group of people who will invest in reading the book, whether
Yeah.
audio or print. So have you ever felt discouraged? Because like you still been like pushing them out no matter what. So like, do you ever feel discouraged? Do you ever feel like you started too late because like people were really reading books in the 90s or the 2000s, but now it just feels like everyone's on TikTok and nobody wants to read? Like, but how does that affect you at all? Like, do you feel discouraged by that, or what encouragement could you provide for a young writer, or any age writer? Because I have someone who wants to write a book, but she is adamant that no one's going to read it because no one's buying books. And I was like, I don't feel like that's true, but I see how you're seeing that. So, what has your experience been in that? I guess.
Well, first, if you could relay this message back to that person, let them know that people don't generally buy books, they generally buy you. And so
Hmm.
there are people that, and I'll start here and then I'll answer your question. There are people who wrote endorsements for my books. Every person who wrote an endorsement for my book did not read the book first. People don't generally write endorsements for someone if they have not read what's there, because it could be something in there that they don't agree with. It may
Right.
go against their morals. So for somebody to trust me to write an
Mhm.
endorsement for something I'm writing, that says something. So make sure you go back and tell that person people are not buying books, they're buying you or
That's
her or
good.
him or they, whatever, whoever they
That's
are.
good. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's the first part of it. For me, I'm writing books because, and I'm going to speak frankly here, one day I'm going to die,
Uh,
and I don't know if I'm going to die before my children or my children are going to die before me. We don't know what God's plans
mhm.
are. But in my mind, there were so many different scenarios as to why I continue to write. Yes, I am discouraged sometimes. I have this really cool book that I was writing, and then all of this stuff happened around diversity. And I'm like, wow, because I've written 5 diversity books on
Right.
diversity thoughts. And God said, write 5 volumes and then leave this alone. It was
Mhm.
also a book of quotes. That's basically what it is, with some commentary on each page for these diversity books, because they were meant to be handbooks for
Okay.
people to talk about thought leadership and all of that stuff. And it's the number one handbook. And I'll give you a little coaching note. It's the number one handbook for diversity thoughts because it's the only one. And I think sometimes when people don't want to write, you don't realize that if you don't show up, you won't have the number one space because you didn't create it. Everybody doesn't have your thought. Everybody doesn't have your creativity. Nobody else has diversity thoughts, 5 handbooks out in the ecosphere, because I created it. It is the
Right.
number one because it's the only one. And so that's one piece. The other piece is I continue to write in different segments or subjects or themes because I have experience in different ones, is because they are my business cards. If I need to go somewhere and speak, if I need to go somewhere and facilitate, I have business cards that I can give them in theory, which are books. If
Yeah.
someone wants me to talk about diversity, I have books. If someone wants me to talk about your purpose, if someone wants me to talk about life realignment, I have a book. If someone wants me, to talk about youth in terms of normalizing suicide, I have a son who wrote a book that was a bestseller. I can pull the book and pull him, and we can co-facilitate,
Mhm.
or he can facilitate, which he will in the future because he's getting ready to graduate from LSU. He just don't know it yet. But you know, all of that to say,
And that was a sad book. I remember reading that. That was sad. I mean, it was
it
good, but I just remember, and I was definitely gonna get to your kids soon,
mm,
because it's like you've left But continue.
Yeah, because I like your questions. They're nice and thought provoking. But yeah, I keep writing because if I died today, my children have a legacy. And I
Hmm.
noticed, and I'm not doing this because people do it when folks die, but people tend to buy things when people die, and I'm like, why don't you buy them when they are alive?
I don't
And so
understand. I just do not understand that.
and I don't know if they think they're more valuable because now that you won't ever see any words from them anymore, this is a collectible and I gotta have it.
But it's almost like the worst time because then if you have a question, you can't ask them. They're
Yes,
gone. But people have said Michael Jackson's catalog was like it skyrocketed when he passed away. You couldn't ask him about those songs anymore. He was gone. Um,
exactly,
so
exactly.
I don't understand it.
So yeah, for me, it excites me to know that I can leave a legacy. I don't want to leave debt. I don't want to leave bills. I want to leave I don't know, stocks. I want to leave bonds. I want to leave CDs. I want to leave homes that are paid off. I want to leave vehicles that you don't have to worry about. I want to leave a legacy that I'm not the most perfect business owner. I call myself an amateur because profit wise, I'm still learning it because I have a 9 to 5 job.
Right.
Eventually, I'll be out of that too. But for now, I have children. I have a daughter that's graduating next year, going to college. So strategically is when my strategic leadership degree comes into play. I still have to provide for my family. If I
Yeah.
had the option, would I be working a 9 to 5? Absolutely not.
Mhm.
But this space has allowed me, and I tell people this: wherever you are, you can get case studies, practical exercises, and
Yeah.
vignettes from anything.
Use everything you have.
Use
Everything is a learning
everything you have. So it's exciting.
Yeah. So with legacy, one thing that I think is amazing is, and I think so. I was talking to, I don't even know. I end up in these weirdest spaces because I'm like, I don't know why I'm having this conversation. I was talking to a group of mothers, and they were saying how they were very gifted women, and they were saying that that some of them, it was split. Some of them said they didn't want their kids to follow in their footsteps, and
Mhm.
some of them said I want to provide ammunition for my child or children, but they don't have to. And then others were like, "Oh, my child's gonna do exactly what I do."
Yes.
And I feel like you're in that middle category because I feel like I've never seen. I've talked to both of your kids, and they are amazing. Um,
Thank you.
but I feel like you've never told them to do these things. But it seems like, at least for your son Victor, like he's written, and Lady had like a notebook and a journal, right? I feel like I remember
Created a
talking to her
journal.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with Victor, like with him publishing the book, and like I said, it was a very good book. It was just sad. I just remember going,
It
oh,
was.
but I think it was important at that time because that was where um, the conversation of suicide was finally being normalized. Not that we ever want the concept of it to be, but the people were starting to talk about it, and I think it was necessary at that time. But what was your process like in pushing him or not pushing him, or foot on the gas, or like were you how do you handle that part of your legacy?
So it's a twofold thing because like you said, they aren't me. They are a product of me. They are a piece of me. They are seeds of me. But even if you get a plant, the plant, you may get two sunflower seeds and put them in a pot. They're not going to sprout in the same direction. They are
Right.
not. They will produce a sunflower, but they're
Hmm.
not going to produce the same branch in the same space. They will not be identical. And so
Yeah.
I look at it that way because they are part of me. But if I tell them they're going to do exactly what I want them to do, the creativity in them is going to be dormant. And I don't want that to happen. Victor
Hmm.
likes to write. He likes to rap. He likes to sing. He doesn't use his voice as much. He likes to rap more. And so for him, I believe at that moment, he went into a depression
Hmm.
because if as you read in the book he had mentioned, and I didn't realize it was as deep as it was because he by nature
Right.
is very
He's very like quiet and
yes
hold,
but
holds it, suppresses it in a way.
yeah,
Like,
and he's not an angry why are you looking at me type person. He's very
mm-mm.
mild, he's very respectful. So it didn't click on me at first that was what was going on. And so he got 100 on the paper. This was a paper at school that he had. And I said, you need to write a book. You need to put this in a book because other people may need it. And he was like, okay, I didn't think it was good enough. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, people need to hear this story. And of course, his book was a bestseller in 24 hours as well. He had a couple of speaking engagements with Top Teens of America and different, small group sessions and stuff. But I believe as a result of that, because we didn't talk about his major, at least I didn't, maybe he did with his dad, but his major in college was sociology with a minor in psychology. And
Hmm.
so I'm like, I wonder what drove this. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. His dad
Right.
actually did have a degree in sociology. So his dad probably, and with a minor in history, and then his granddad has a degree in history. And so he may have gone that route for that way, but I really believe that if it was something in his heart he wanted to do, he found a degree to work around that.
Yeah.
On top of that, he's a musician. So I was talking to him about what's next. He was like, I don't know. I really want to do something to help people, but I want music. I said, there is music therapy. I
I
said,
was
so
say go the music therapy route. That could
music
be a
therapy.
way
I
to
said,
go.
and I don't hear a lot about it. So you may enter the space and be the person to be the trailblazer for music therapy. So we're not going to dismiss any of your
Mm-hmm.
dreams, because for me, if I had the option, I would have taken the full music scholarship to Alcorn, and I would have been probably a performing artist right now, and my life would look different.
Mm-hmm.
But my mom was a drug addict. My grandmother passed away before I graduated high school. So I'm going to where it's comfortable and where my,
Right.
my family was primarily in Grambling, and I got scholarships to Grambling. So I'm like, I'll just do this. And I could always sing. So for me, it's come full circle. I'm not
Yeah.
a huge Beyonce performing artist, but if I have to minister, I will minister. And
Yeah.
I'm okay with that for now. If God wants me to pull that gift somewhere else, once again, it's a business card. If we're talking on the business side, people know that I have a gift of song. If they want me to sing, they do. If they not, they don't, then oh well.
And you
So
have the
this
proof.
card,
You have the CD out. So you've got the
yes,
proof.
absolutely.
That's amazing. I would he really does have a really good voice too. But I know he's always I think it was about a couple months ago. I was like, Victor, where you gonna sing again? And he was like, but rapping. I was like, whatever. But I think it's always amazing for like give people the chance to evolve in their own way. Like
Hmm.
and I think that's one thing I try to tell people, like don't push what your desire of someone's gift is on them, because like even though he may never sing the way we want him to sing, like he's still going to use it how he uses it.
Hmm.
Although if you ever want to use mom guilt to push him back to singing, then we the people would not be upset about that. But
At
his rapping is, it's melodic in a way too, so it's like he can't escape it. But anyway,
all.
he's not here today.
That's right. To
um
defend himself.
Right. Okay, so I guess like we could keep talking forever, but like what would you what would you think is next? Because like you've done the summit, you've done the books, you've been the bestseller, you've got your speaking, you've done a podcast. Like, what are your, like? Do you have any more writing goals? Like, do you want to? Actually, before we do that, the collaboration writing was, I think, one of the things that was most interesting to me,
Mhm.
because I had never, prior to that post that you put out, so let's say like we're doing a compilation novel, I had never seen that at the price point that you were putting it at, and to like where you don't own the people, if that makes sense. Like I've seen people say like, hey, you can be a part of this novel I'm in, but it's gonna be, $5,000 plus I get all royalties, I get all this, I get all whatever, and I'm not even gonna help you publish or anything like that. So like what like led you to that, and talk about that process a little bit too.
Sure. Yeah, I so the book that I wrote, Married to My Purpose, this was the compilation book where I was the primary composing author of the book. And as I thought about it, to be honest, this book was a spinoff from another book when I was married. And so since that book is no longer in print, and I wrote this book as a joint venture with my ex-husband,
Mm-hmm.
His 9 chapters belong to him as intellectual property, and my 9 chapters belonged to me as my intellectual property. And I don't like to waste things, so I'm like, this book is not in print. Nobody will ever read it again unless they bought the book. um, what am I supposed to do with this? God said, write a book. And I'm like, what
Mm-hmm.
do you mean, write a book? And Married to My Purpose came from a prayer, like a prayer plea, if you will, because I was, I was crying out. I was like, wait a minute, I don't know what else to do. I've been married 23 years. This is my purpose. Like, and it's interesting because when we're humans and we're crying out to that trusted person, and you're just crying out, and then there's that moment where they jump in and say no.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the moment where God said, your marriage was never your purpose. You made your husband your God, and you made your marriage
Mm-hmm.
something that was never supposed to be. Okay, so you made your marriage your purpose. I didn't do that. You did that. So now you've got to come back to the center and understand that you need to be married to your own purpose first.
Yeah.
You can't go into a marriage not whole or understanding and have some level of self-awareness, because you're
Mm-hmm.
going to take on the mold of whatever the stronger current is in the environment that you're in. And that's what happened. I veered away. And so I was like, that's it. That's the platform, Married to My Purpose. And that's how I got the name and the platform. So when I
Yeah.
wrote this book, I said, you know what? There are people around me that have asked me about writing books that have never been authors. There are other people that are already authors that are going through things in their lives, or they want to continue to venture out. There's a combination of dynamics for the authors that are in that book. You have people in that book that have written already, that have been bestsellers already. You had people that have never written books that were terrified to write. You had other
Mm-hmm.
people who knew how to write, coming out of doctorate programs, and wanted to have something to stamp. You had other people that were military folks that were retiring and didn't think that their purpose was anything other than the military. So in my head, I didn't really pick them because I just put it out there. And the
Yeah.
people that came back, there was a lady that was a minister and an elder that wrote in this book. So they are Christians. And many of them, I watch them now, and they're venturing out. They're still posting this book and having people to come and to speak and buy these books. For me, it was an opportunity, and I worked really hard to make it a bestseller, because all of my books are not bestsellers. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason I'm publishing is because I want business cards to be floating. I'm putting myself in the atmosphere in different
Right.
ways. The next book is probably going to be about, well, a few of them in a variety of ways: leadership, leadership in the workplace, a book about worship and how you worship. And it's not just holding your hands up and getting on your knees and going to the altar. Worship is an everyday thing. So I'm just throwing some things out there that God has given me. I hadn't even written yet. Those are business cards. And
Yeah.
they're business cards for different spaces. One of my coaches said to me one time, if you want to get into a space, write a book. I was like, what are you talking about? He said, I've never worked with um, football teams. I've never worked with sports teams, but because I want to work with sports teams and get into that space, I'm going to write a book about the agility of diversity. Or I'm just making this up, because he did write a book. I just can't remember the title of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they asked him, and he actually sent out a proposal to work with them, he sent his book. So in order for him to get into the space, he wants to connect with the space. So he writes a book. Right now, I think he has
Smart.
68 books.
Wow.
And
I
he
mean,
is,
that's smart. That's like literally the proof of concept model, but like not just like here's an outline, but like here's a whole book,
yes.
which is just, I guess, like you just I'd say I've never thought of it like that before, but it just makes sense. Yeah.
And he has the trifecta. He's an author, he's a speaker, and he's a coach. And so I've been taught that there's a trifecta. Um, I have in my intellectual portfolio that I'm a triple threat, because I'm an author, a speaker, and a coach. And like you
Hmm.
said, everybody cannot do that. It's not that they can't. They may not have that thing to say, I want to do this. I'm excited about it. But
Right.
I want to have as many branches as possible to reach as many people. Some people may not read the book, but they'll listen to me speak. Some
Yeah.
people may not want to listen to me speak, but they want me to coach them. And so the dynamic of that, when it comes together, back to the question about your book, I did all three. when I
Yeah.
wrote that book, because I allowed people, we were in a private group, and as we are developing this book, as I'm doing the self publishing on Amazon, I'm showing them what I'm doing. So now in their lives, they can go do this on their own. They don't have to come back to me as a repeat customer unless they want to compile with me. They now
Hmm.
know how to do it. And they did it at a really cheap price because it could have
Yeah.
been way more expensive. And I said, that's not what this project is about. I wanted to have at least 50 people in the project at that rate so that people can learn how to do it on their own. I
Hmm.
love to coach, but I want to coach where people who I've coached go out and coach people, or they can go out and execute what they've learned. I want you to be a repeat customer, but I don't want you to be a repeat customer,
Hmm.
because if you're coming back, either you're coming back because you just love to be in my space, but if you're coming back because you're not learning anything, I don't necessarily want to attract that. I want to
Got
attract
it.
people that can get it and go share it. So
Yeah. You better have your disciple program. Send them out. Teach them, go out two by two, spreading the good word. You better go
you
ahead now.
always got a word, boy.
Um, that's amazing. So even with that, I'll be honest. Like because I saw the post and I was like, I should sign up for this. And I remember getting very nervous. And I remember like I was just like, oh, I'm not good enough for this. Like this is like there was just all the thoughts that went through. So like obviously I did not do it. And I there was somebody else. I think I shared the post, and then one of my friends from school saw it as well, and he felt the same way. So
Mm.
like, what would you like? Obviously, I know we everyone knows I got to work on. I'm working in public to get my confidence up.
Yay.
So I'm building in public, everybody. But for those who are who who feel that way, I guess what encouragement do you have for people to put it out there? Because I think a lot of people traditionally they're looking for publishing deals, and I think a lot of people don't know that you literally can go to Amazon and you can publish your book. You can self-publish it through Kinko's, if that even
Mhm,
exists anymore. FedEx, I think that's what
mhm.
I really wanted to say. um but like, because I remember when I did my first book, which I never talk about, and one of these days I'll re-release it, hopefully.
Which I don't know
um
why, but anyway.
because like, and every time I look at it, I just like, you could have done better. But it was out there. It's out there. And I am working on another one that
Yay.
hopefully next year we'll see. I don't know. But for people who are nervous about writing, what are some like myths you could dispel? Maybe either about the Amazon publishing process or just the process in general to like kind of ease people in this moment.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll start off with is by saying it's not as expensive as you think, number one. Number two, there are other people who do this work, people like me who know how to do it. You can partner.
Hmm.
And some people are not as expensive to hire or to contract or whatever. So the money side of it is one of the fears I think that people have that turns them off, because they're like, oh my God, I was working with another client and she said, now let's talk about the price of this. And I know I'm going to have to empty my savings. I'm like, no, it's free. You're self publishing. And she just broke down in tears. She was like, so I'm just basically waiting to publish this book and it's really now me. I said, yeah. And I'm not going to push you, but you need to
Hmm.
publish it because it's a
Yeah.
release. You're not going to realize the therapy that you went through in this book until you see it and you feel it in your hand. It is a form of therapy and people run from it. I think from a spiritual side, it's a trick of the enemy where you're holding somebody back from the freedom that they pray for.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not all together there all the time. I get down, I get sad. I'm going through a transition in life. I'm used to having a partner, a life mate to handle things, and now it's just me.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, there was an accident that happened at our church. You probably
Oh
heard,
yeah.
and it triggered me because I was like, I don't normally handle this. I never thought about that until that
Mm.
happened, and it just nudged my car. But the
Yeah.
fact I saw it, and I'm standing there, and the pastor came out. He said, where are you? Like, I was just standing there like this. And I just started to cry. And I'm like, what is going on? What am I doing this for? And
Mm.
my brain started to talk to me. My spirit started to talk to me like, you've got to let some areas go because you're not incapable.
Yeah.
And you were
Yeah.
not always married.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
understand that. But in my head, it was my life. It was how I lived the majority of my adult life. And I'm pivoting. some things happen where it reminds me. So when I write, it's a form of therapy. When I write, understand, as people who may not have written it and who are afraid to write, just write. Don't try and organize it. Open up your notes on your phone, open up the voice recorder. I don't know, open up AI. I don't know. Tell AI, listen, I'm thinking about writing a book. I'm afraid. What should I write about? I have these skill sets.
Mm,
What's your idea of what I should write about? I use AI all the time. And a lot of people are afraid of that. Like, it's fake. No, it's not fake, because
it's not.
you can only put, if you're going to really use AI the right way, there's some attributes about you. And when I'm saying you, whoever's listening to this, there's some attributes about you that no one else can ever write. For example, I'll give you one. I'm not going to do a culture because it's 9:54. Oh my God, we've been talking that long. Okay. So yeah, I didn't think we would take up the time, but
Well,
here we
we also started later. It's 40 minutes. So
Okay. Okay. Cool. So I could put in something like, AI, I want you to create a um an abstract about a little girl who grew up in Louisiana,
Mm,
um, in Doty Garden Circle, by her grandmother who raised her. She never met her dad. Like, there are so many specific attributes to you that if somebody were to go and look that up, they couldn't find it.
correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so we underestimate the tools. AI is not to replace, it's to supplement.
Yeah, it's a tool for sure.
People don't use it that way. Like, one of my girlfriends was like, I bought a book from somebody and she forgot to take out, hey, does this sound right to you? And it's literally published in the book. And so now her credibility is shot, because people think that what she wrote was not accurate. It was accurate, but she used the tool and she wasn't thorough enough, or her
That
editor. So that's
that
an
is
example. Use what you got, use what
yeah.
you got, and don't be afraid. Like, what you have inside of you is what needs to be shared. Here's the last powerful thing that happened to me that I'll share with you all. Look at yourself as this pure spirit. Then you put this robe on, and then you put another robe on, and then you put another robe on, so the essence of who you truly are is covered.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's covered, the world can see that you have on robes, but you know that there are other things in there that are under the robes. Because you may have never tapped into it, that's what causes us to say, I'm not good enough. Well, you got this robe on. You got a robe
Mm-hmm.
of doubt on. Well, I mean, I don't write that well. Well, you have this robe of insecurity on. And nobody told us to put it on. Life
Right.
happens. And either we say, no, I'm not going to put this robe on. That's not what God told me. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. He's given me this mind. It's not meant to be robed, but we
Mm-hmm.
robe all the time. Our
Yeah.
representatives show up all the time to protect, when in essence, the protection is really bondage. So I'll leave you with that and say, hey, just step out. Just make the first, just start. Just go. Do it scared. Do it scared.
Well, that is a beautiful way to end because that is the benediction. Somebody passed the collection plate. We have Cash App, the Church Center app, all of them.
Oh,
Feels like you
geez,
just preached a sermon. But no, I think that's really good. Thank you so much for your transparency, for your wisdom. I hope that it gives me encouragement, encourages me. I know it'll encourage somebody else. And I think doing it as a Black woman in today's society is just even more encouragement and how you're moving and taking up space and just really being all that God is calling you to be. And I'm excited for what comes next. I'm excited to continue to support. If you guys are watching, I'll put link her Facebook and her Instagram in the description, because she is active on Facebook for sure. Not so much on Instagram. But I gotta go to Facebook to see her, but she keeps me on the Facebook side for sure. But that's
I
where you
have
can
to
keep up
work
with
on
any
that.
I guess where you keep up with any updates that she's got going on, any conferences, classes, whatever the case is. Um, but yeah, so thank you so much. And this has been another episode of the Create as Well podcast. I hope you have left refreshed, renewed, revitalized, new confidence, something to keep going. So yeah, thank you so much, Miss
You are
Serelda.
welcome.
All right. And